If you were trapped in a giant crater by a group of cannibalistic orphans and their witch mother, what would you do? These people-snatching hillbillies are absolutely insane, and one wrong move into their territory means that you'll never escape alive. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the crater cult crater dwellers in the seeding. This photographer is about to have the worst hike of his life. Early one morning, somewhere far out in the deserts of Utah, a young boy wearing nothing but a dirty diaper is wandering around on his own. This is clearly no place for a baby to be, but this right here is no ordinary baby. It's a cannibal baby, because instead of a pacifier, he's chewing on somebody's finger. That same day, photographer Wyndham Stone parks his car and sets off into the desert with his camera equipment, having no idea that this is the last hike that he's ever going to take. After walking for miles through the empty rock-covered landscape, he eventually reaches an overlook where he decides to set up his gear. He's there to get some photographs of the solar eclipse that's happening that afternoon, and after getting the shots that he needs, he decides to pack up and head back to his car, but that's when everything goes horribly wrong. On his way back to the car, he comes across a young boy sitting alone in the single slice of shade provided by a small tree. Concerned, he stops to ask the kid what's wrong, and the boy explains that he is lost, claiming that he somehow got separated from his parents. Stone offers to help him out, but the kid immediately gets up and starts wandering away in the opposite direction from his car, insisting that his parents are that way. Not wanting to let him fend for himself, Stone decides to follow the boy further into the empty desert. But that, as you might be guessing, was his biggest mistake.
Okay, hold the phone, Stone. Let me just stop you right the there. We're not seriously about to follow these little the hills have eyes looking creeps back to his so-called parents' cannibal dungeon right now, are we? Because unless you've been living under the biggest rock in downtown Stupidville for your entire life, then you should damn well know the warning signs of a redneck torture family when you see them. Little Leatherface Jr. here wants us to believe that he lost his parents. Yeah, right. Likely story, bud. Here's why I'm not buying it. First of all, take a look around. Besides a few valleys between the rocks, you could practically see for miles in every direction. So you tell me what could have possibly happened that led him getting separated so far from his parents without anyone noticing. Did they suddenly put on the cloak of invisibility from Harry Potter and intentionally leave his ass behind? Because otherwise, I don't see how this could have happened. Come to think of it, Stone here took the only road nearby and followed this exact path to get here. But at no point along the way did he see a single trace of anyone else in the area. He never passed another car or saw them hiking earlier that day as a family, so you have to wonder, if this kid was really telling the truth, then where's that extra Subaru Outback that Stone should have seen when he parked back at the trailhead, That's suspicious. Awfully suspicious. But wait, there's more. Now, I hate to be the fashion police here, but what exactly is this kid wearing anyway? Does this look like the kind of fit that any responsible parent would let their kid wear during an all-day hike through the desert to you? Because I've never seen Bear Grylls hitting the trail in a pair of tiger camo gym shorts and oversized rubber boots. Unless he got those bad boys as a present from Mr. Krabs, then I'm not too sure what's going on here. Stone here doesn't know it, but he's about to walk right into a death trap, and it's all because he decided to follow this kid instead of taking a more cautious approach. If you're ever hiking through the desert and find a lost child, here's what you might want to do instead. First, you need to make sure that your immediate surroundings are safe and that there are no life-threatening dangers like a steep cliff or a chainsaw-wielding redneck nearby. Once you're sure that it's safe, the next step is to contact emergency services if you can, and wait in that spot until help eventually arrives. Even if he doesn't have cell service, Stone should still try to use the SOS feature on his phone. He may be out of service from whatever provider that he's using, but there are actually laws in place that require cell phone companies to allow you to make emergency calls from any tower that you're within range of. And some newer models of phones can still send SOS via satellite, even if you're somewhere that's completely off of the grid. That's what you'd want to do in a perfect situation, but Stone and the kid here are also facing other problems. They can't wait out here in the desert forever because as soon as that little little sliver of shade is gone, they're going to risk succumbing to dehydration, heat stroke, and not to mention a really bad sunburn. On the reverse side, if they're stuck out there after dark, nighttime in the desert can be dangerously cold, especially at high elevations. Sooner or later, they're going to need to seek shelter, but the good news is that only the kid is lost. Stone hasn't wandered off from the path back to his car yet, so in this case, I'd give it a few minutes while I tried to contact rescue. And if the kid's parents still hadn't shown up, then the best thing to do would be to head back to the car. What you definitely do not want to do is follow the kid even farther away from any forms of civilization. After all, didn't he just say that he was lost, but now he's suddenly so sure of the exact direction that his parents are in? It's sus to say the least, and personally I wouldn't be opposed to letting this weird little kid here fend for himself if that's what I needed to do. I'm not sure if you can get in trouble for that, but trust me, you'd much rather have to deal with the local authorities than what Stone's about to experience anyway. What's up, everybody? We're gonna take a quick break from the action to talk about something important: the family jewels. Did you know? Every single hour, one man is diagnosed with testicular cancer. Yeah, it's the most common form of cancer among guys aged 15 to 35. That's why for National Testicular Cancer Awareness Month this April, I wanted to talk about something important: men's health. Like many of you, 73% if my YouTube analytics are right, I am a part of that group that is at risk of testicular cancer. And it's super important to know all of the facts, which is where Manscaped comes in. Partnering with the Testicular Cancer Society, they're helping men prioritize their health and hygiene. Think about it. We use Manscaped products every day to keep things clean and trimmed below the belt, so the partnership makes perfect sense. Speaking of keeping things clean, Manscaped sent me their latest and greatest tool, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Trimmer. This bad boy is not only cordless, but also waterproof. But really, that's not all. The 5.0 Ultra boosts dual skin-safe blade heads. First, the upgraded trimmer blade has longer, wider, and rounded teeth for smooth, easy cutting. It gets the job done right the first time, leaving your skin happy. But here's where things get exciting. This bad boy also comes with a foil blade for an extra close, super smooth finish. No matter what kind of trim you're after, the 5.0 Ultra has you covered. Plus, the powerful LED light lets you see exactly what you're doing, even in those tricky areas. And the performance? Amazing. The constant RPM motor ensures consistent power, even when the battery gets low. Plus, with a whopping 60 minutes of runtime per charge, you can tackle even the most thorough grooming sessions. But like I was saying, Manscaped goes beyond just providing top-notch grooming tools. They're dedicated to men's health and early cancer detection. That's why they've partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society. Together, the TCS and Manscaped are raising awareness about testicular cancer. They're also providing support for fighters, survivors, and families impacted by this disease. And get this, Manscaped is donating $50,000 to the Testicular Cancer Society. They also have a pretty hilarious and educational video called Check Yourself, which teaches you all you need to know. You gotta check it out. Head on over to manscaped.com and use my promo code for 20% off and free shipping on the Lawnmower 5.0 and their other great products. Join the Manscaped movement, and remember, take care of your pair.
The two keep walking for miles until the afternoon sun is already low in the sky. There's still no sign of the boy's parents anywhere, and every time that Stone tries to ask about them, the boy keeps changing the subject without explaining anything. Frustrated, Stone decides that he's had enough and tries to forcefully redirect the boy back towards his car before it gets too dark to find their way back. But the kid pushes him off and starts running away into the distance, turning around to smirk at him as he disappears over a rocky crest. With the daylight and supplies running low, Stone calls it quits and starts traveling back in the direction where he thinks that his car should be. But it isn't long before he realizes that he's now hopelessly lost. As he stops to catch his breath, he hears what sounds like human voices coming from somewhere beyond the tree line, and immediately takes off running in that direction, hoping to find some help. The voices turn out to be a dead end, and with no way back to his car, he's forced to take shelter in a small recess in a hillside inside. But just as he's struggling to fall asleep, he hears the unmistakable sound of a woman singing. Checking it out, he's finally able to find the woman, but the scene in front of him is stranger than anything he could have imagined. There, at the bottom of a deep crater, he sees a single tin-roofed shack with a lone woman wearing a shabby white gown, walking through the yard and quietly singing to herself in a language that he's never heard before. The only way down is by two ladders, an iron one embedded into the rocks that stops about halfway down, and a second rope ladder that reaches the rest of the way. But the truth is that he's never going to reach the surface again. Approaching the shack, Stone aggressively pounds on the front door like he's there serving an arrest warrant. But when nobody answers, he tries the handle and realizes that it's unlocked, which is when he decides to let himself in. The woman, Alina, is standing there in the kitchen and she calmly invites him to come in and have a seat. Stone tries to ask if she has a phone or knows how he can get back to his car, but Alina insists that he stays to have a bite to eat first, telling him to set his bags down by the floor. Not wanting to insult her, Stone takes a seat at the ramshackle kitchen table in front of a nasty-looking bowl of stew. He tries to explain about what happened with the boy and how he came to find her house, but the woman refuses to engage him in any conversation, keeping completely silent as she picks away at her own dish. After grabbing him a glass of water, she remarks that he looks tired and points to a spare bed in the corner where she says that he can get some rest. Stone wasn't exactly looking to spend the night, but with nowhere else to go, he reluctantly decides to hunker down and drifts off into an uneasy sleep. In the morning, Stone wakes up early and quietly lets himself out before the woman is out of bed. It's the first time seeing the crater in the daylight, and he quickly notices that the woman's yard is full of strange contraptions meant for unknown purposes. But what's really important is what's missing: the long rope ladder that would have been his only way out.
Okay, well, boy oh boy, if it isn't the consequences of our actions. I guess it looks like this little sleepover just turned into an extended visit. Fun! Stone here probably should have thought things through a bit more before descending into a crater that he had no way to climb back out of. But the fact that he didn't see this one coming honestly makes it seem like he just might deserve what's about to happen. I hate to say I told you so I'll say this instead. Stone, you f***ed up! Alright, let's take a quick look at where it all went wrong and try to learn something here from Stone's mistakes. First off, he followed the creepy redneck kid into the unknown, and we already went over the laundry list of reasons why that this was a bad idea. Then, when he was lost in the desert while it was starting to get dark, he decided to go towards the sounds of other human voices. And obviously, that turned out to be a big mistake. It might seem like it makes sense from a survival standpoint, right? But if you've ever heard stories of the skinwalkers before, then you'd know that mysterious human voices in the dark are your sign to run for your life. And this is all the proof that we need that Stone here was clearly out of his element. Things started off bad enough, but somehow Stone here has found a way to make his situation even worse. In a moment of utter stupidity that will go down in history as one of the worst decisions ever made, this guy straight up saw a chainsaw massacre house at the bottom of an inescapable crater with a creepy lady in a white nightgown walking around in the dark singing to herself and said, "You know what? I should go down there." It's like he was trying to end up as a human sacrifice. Stone, buddy, I don't know how to tell you this, but that's a witch house if I've ever seen one. Most people, myself included, would have been too scared to even knock on the door, but you walked right in like you own the damn place. And that's how I can already tell that you won't be making it to the sequel. It was suspicious enough that the door wasn't even locked, but what really should have made his spidey senses tingle is when Alina here didn't immediately start screaming bloody murder at the sight of a strange man barging into her kitchen in the dead of night. Like, hello? It's almost as if she was expecting him to be there, and that's your cue to turn right back around before you find out what her plans are. Instead, Stone here sat down, had a meal, and even decided to sleep over. I mean, seriously, guy, did your parents ever read you a single fairy tale as a kid? Even a 5-year-old knows that if a creepy lady in the middle of nowhere invites you into her shack for dinner, you need to get the absolute hell out of there before she winds up putting you in the next stew. I get that he had, nowhere else to go, but to be honest, after getting one look at this place, I'd rather have taken my chances out in the desert with the scorpions instead. The minute that he heard that she didn't have a phone, Stone here should have immediately been on his way back up out of there. But now it looks like getting home just got a lot more challenging. Good luck, you're gonna need it, especially once you realize what they really are up to down here. For now though, I guess that there's only one thing left to say, and it's Stone, my guy, you f***ed up.
When Alina finally wakes up, she gets right to doing her daily chores without even acknowledging Stone's existence. After helping her slide a new tin sheet onto her roof, he tries to ask the woman what all happened to the ladder, but she only replies that people use it sometimes, and says that she has no idea when it might be back. To make matters even worse, Alina here casually mentions that it's the only way out, saying this as if there was never a chance of him escaping in the first place. Not satisfied with this answer, Stone decides to take matters into his own hands and starts trying to figure out how to get back up for himself. He starts out by trying to find a navigable path up the wall, but he's a photographer, not a rock climber, and suddenly realizes that he can't make it more than a few yards up. Growing desperate, Stone begins shouting for help from whoever might be within earshot, but the only reply that he gets is the sound of his own cries echoing off the crater walls. Defeated and annoyed, he returns to Alina's shack, and the woman insists on getting him washed up. During their short conversation, it's revealed that Stone here doesn't have a wife or anyone else who might be looking for him. With the ladder gone and Alina offering no help, he's forced to settle in for another night in the crater and take a crack at escaping again tomorrow.
Okay, wow. Of all the escape attempts that I've ever seen, that was definitely one of them. I know that we're not exactly talking about the guy from Free Solo here, but was that really the best that he had? It's hard to say for sure, but it looks like Stone could have gone right up no problem if he had just taken the less steep slope a little bit to the left. But instead, he literally chose the hardest possible spot to try and climb up the wall. Use your brain, man. In the end, he wasted an entire day flopping around like a fish out of water, and now it looks like he's stuck there for another night. But on the bright side, at least this gives him plenty of time to rethink his strategy. Tomorrow definitely calls for a different approach, unless he wants to stay trapped down there forever. So here's what I'm thinking that he might want to try instead. The walls of this place are definitely steep, but they don't look completely impossible to climb, especially if you're able to get your hands on some equipment. Stone may not have brought any climbing gear, but that doesn't mean that he can't use his creativity to make some. Alina's shack is full of junk, and that's good for Stone because he needs to use whatever materials he can find to try and craft himself some makeshift tools that can help him get back to the surface. Overnight, he should search the place for any useful materials. The list could include some thick rope, cord, or even strips of fabric like torn-up bed sheets that are strong enough to support his weight. He'll also need a hook or some other sturdy piece of metal that can serve as an anchor to help him climb. Any tools like a hammer or pliers would not only be useful in creating more complex devices, but the tools themselves could be used to bite into any handholds in the rocks and give Stone here some extra leverage. I'd also try something simple like wrapping his hands with cloth to prevent them from getting cut or burned on the sharp, hot rocks. Now, based on what kind of gear that he can get together and how confident he feels about his own climbing abilities, Stone's next choices really boil down to one of two main options. In the morning, he can either try to find a less difficult route and go the long way up one of the walls, or instead try to throw some sort of grappling hook through the bottom rungs of the ladder and pull himself up that way. I'd suggest starting with option 1 first, and if climbing out the old-fashioned way didn't work, then we can get a little crazy with the grappling hook idea. Realistically, going with option 2 would take a good arm, an incredibly lucky shot, and a serious amount of upper body strength. But if all else fails, then it sure as hell couldn't hurt to give it a try.
At sunrise on the next day, Stone starts digging through the shack for any supplies that he can get his hands on. There isn't much for him to work with, but he's able to find a sturdy-looking brick hammer and thinks that it just might be his ticket out of there. Using his hammer to hold his grip, he's able to make it much higher up the wall than he was the day before. But the rocks are blisteringly hot in the direct sunlight, and he still has a long way to go. Finally, Stone makes it nearly halfway to freedom when all of a sudden, someone throws Porky Pig's severed head down from the cliff above, which causes him to lose his grip and plummet some 20 feet back down the crater below, knocking him out on impact with the ground. By the time that he finally wakes up, Stone finds that it's already late the following night, and the chisel end of the hammer is still buried in his leg just above the knee. Hearing his screams of agony, Alina comes out to help him, painfully removing the hammer from his leg and dragging him back into the house to treat his wounds.
Okay, damn. So close, yet so far. I'd say that he'll be getting out of there when pigs fly. But it looks like that's already happened, and he's still not any closer to making it home. And to absolutely blow it when he was so close to freedom too. Man, I'd almost feel bad for the guy if it wasn't for the fact that he only has himself to blame for even ending up in this situation in the first place. It looks like climbing out won't be an option now that he has an injured leg. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing else for him to do. Since he won't be able to rescue himself now, the next best thing is to try and bring rescue to him. And for that, Stone needs to come up with a way to signal for some help. There are a few different approaches that he might want to take here. First, as long as his phone is still working, I'd try that SOS idea again. Also, he could try sending a text to a close friend or relative asking for help and giving them a rough idea for where to look. He may not have service right now, but if by some miracle his phone happens to find some even for a split second, then the text might go through as long as his phone is still on. To conserve power, he should try turning the screen brightness down to its lowest setting, and making sure to always leave his phone in the shade so that it doesn't overheat. Otherwise, the next step might be to take the old school approach and do the same thing that you would do on a deserted island, by making a giant SOS signal out in the front yard. With all of the junk that's lying around this place, Stone should have plenty of materials to work with. And a nice big sign just might catch the attention of any plane or helicopter that happens to fly overhead. The same goes for trying to send a signal with the reflection of the sun by using some glass, either from a bottle or bowl that he finds around the house, or even his own camera lens. This would be the most difficult strategy to pull off timing-wise, but right now, Stone here has nothing but time on his hands, so there's no reason to not try it. Finally, he should start a large fire out in the open and keep it burning at all times. Someone might come just from seeing the smoke or light from the fire at night. And if he wants to get really creative, then he could try making some smoke signals. Way before people could send a text, one of the best ways to communicate over long distances was to use smoke. And even in the modern day, the Boy Scouts are still taught to use 3 puffs of smoke as a way to signal that they're in danger. To do this, Stone should create a smoky fire using grass branches or other junk from Alina's yard. Next, he needs to throw a wet blanket over the fire until the smoke trail stops, and then continue lifting it on and off to create the puff effect. This might manage to get someone's attention just out of curiosity, and anyone who recognizes the signal will immediately know that it's a call for help. I'd be willing to light the whole cabin up if we really needed to, but my suggestion would be to hold off on that until things get more desperate, because right now, it's in Stone's best interest to try to get along with Alina here. It looks like he's going to be stuck there for a while, so the smartest thing is to pretend to be friendly for as long as possible, and see if he can somehow win her over. Maybe he can eventually convince her to help him escape, or she'll at least let some information slip that he can use to get out of there, like the location of the second secret exit. Either way, getting on her bad side probably isn't advisable given the current situation. She cooks and knows how to treat his injuries, and I, for one, wouldn't want to be stuck down there without any food or medicine. Plus, he's going to need her as a potential meat shield if he ever runs into any trouble. So I'd try my best to play along just for now. The thing is, now we know that Alina isn't the only one out here. And the pig head incident tells us that they're most likely a threat. Knowing this, I'd make it a priority to get my hands on some kind of weapon, just in case, and always be on guard for any future encounters with whoever dropped that head.
Stone spends the following days bedridden in a feverish state, badly injured and with no way to know how much time has passed. After several days, he's finally recovered enough to get back on his feet and immediately picks up where he left off, trying to get the hell out of there. Furious, he starts shouting at the cliffs now that he's sure that someone is watching them from up there. But when he gets no answer, he turns his frustration back on Alina herself, blaming her for trapping him there. The woman still refuses to explain what's going on, only saying that she can take care of him here in an attempt to calm him down, but Stone pushes her away, insisting that he doesn't want to stay here. He wants to get back to his old life. Just as he's starting to lose hope, Stone hears a voice calling to him from somewhere outside of the crater, and that's when he spots a strange-looking older boy named Corvus watching him from the cliffs above. The man instantly jumps to his feet, shouting at the kid to call the police, but for some reason he doesn't seem to be getting the message. Finally, the kid agrees to go get his winch and pull him up, but before he does, he asks Stone an odd question. He wants to know his favorite color. Confused, Stone answers that it's red, and the kid says that he'll come back soon, but what he doesn't realize is that Corvus here is the last person that he should trust. After a while, Corvus comes back and throws down a rope just like he promised, but he's about to realize that these kids definitely are not coming to the rescue. Grabbing the rope, Stone quickly secures one end around his waist, and the boys start slowly pulling him up towards the surface. But when he reaches just about halfway, they suddenly disappear, leaving him dangling there from the edge of the cliff like an idiot on a string. Stone here is absolutely furious, shouting like a maniac for the boys to keep going, but the reality quickly sets in that he's been tricked, and without the strength to make the rest of the climb himself, he eventually gives up and passes out from exhaustion.
Okay, well, I guess we met the neighbors. Stone here really should have known that these guys were only messing with him. I mean, what's your favorite color? Who in their right mind would ask something like that at a time like this? The problem is that even if Stone was a bit suspicious, this was also his best and only shot at getting out of there, so he was kind of screwed either way. Right now, it might look like Stone here is in a bad spot, but the reality is that he's not completely helpless. On the bright side, at least he's already halfway up, and now he has a rope. If he gathers enough momentum to swing himself over towards the wall, then he could possibly pull himself up using his legs to brace himself. Mostly his good leg, of course. If that doesn't work, then he could try climbing straight up the rope instead. He's too exhausted and injured to pull himself up with only his arms, but there are ways that he could use the rope and his legs to make it easier. One thing that he can try is a climbing technique called the S method. For this, he first needs to pull himself up as high as he can with his arms. Then, tuck the rope on the outside and under the bottom of one foot, and then pinch it back up using the inside and upper part of the other foot, creating an S-type shape. This allows you to hold your weight with your feet, leaving your arms free to reach up and pull you along with the rest of the rope. After getting it down, all that he needs to do is keep going with this motion until he reaches the top. It's going to be a workout, especially with his injured leg, but it's better than being stuck hanging this high above the ground.
Sometime later, Stone is rudely awakened by a shower of yellow raindrops falling on his head. The boys are back, but they've had enough of pretending to be his friend, and instead they start swinging him violently back and forth through the air, all while breaking out into a disturbing, uncanny chant. Just as they're reaching a fever pitch of demonic excitement, Alina rushes out of the shack and shouts for them to stop, but the momentum of his swinging carries Stone headfirst into the side of a cliff, knocking him unconscious for the second time since he ended up there. It's after dark again by the time that Stone wakes up, and he wastes no time rushing right back out of the house, but he only makes it a few steps before he collapses to his knees, his injuries making it impossible for him to go on. As Alina comes to check on him, Stone asks her who exactly these strange boys are. She explains that they're a group of orphans who live somewhere out in the desert and like to torment anyone who crosses their path simply as a way to stop themselves from getting bored. Several days go by without another escape attempt as Stone begins slowly acclimating to life down here in the pit. One morning, Alina releases a caged aged finch that she's been nursing back to health, the irony of which is not lost on our unfortunate photographer. During dinner that night, she goes to a large box in the corner and grabs Stone some fresh clothes, including some thicker layers for when the weather gets cold. Stone here says that he has no intentions for staying that long, but Alina clearly has a different idea. With time dragging on, the man decides to plant a garden as a way to keep himself occupied. One day while he's working out, one of the kids shows up and lowers down a basket full of supplies, including some food, water, and even a few bottles of booze. That night, Alina puts on a fancy red dress and cooks the two of them a gourmet meal compared to the nasty stew that they've been surviving off of for the last 2 months. Stone wonders out loud why she's so quiet all of the time, but as usual, she refuses to entertain any of his questions. The man's been hitting the bottle hard all day, and he's starting to get a bit delirious. But as he downs his cup and reaches for another swig, Alina forcefully stops him, insisting that he's had enough. Just then, Stone hears an inhuman shriek from somewhere outside the cabin. It looks like the boys are back again, and Alina is clearly worried about what they might do, but despite her pleading with him to stay inside, Storm storms out into the crater to confront them, ready to fight to the death. Grabbing a hatchet, he wanders through the darkness towards the sounds of their howling laughter, and suddenly he spots one of the boys standing a few feet ahead, dressed in nothing but his underwear and a long white wig. The others begin to swarm around him, distracting him long enough that Corvus is able to leap onto his back and tackle him to the ground. But he quickly gets up and disappears back into the shadows a moment later, leaving Stone deeply shaken up, but otherwise unharmed. In a blind rage, Stone staggers back into the cabin and corners Alina in the kitchen, furiously raving at her for being so unsettlingly resigned to this hellish experience. She tries to calm him down by suggesting that he needs to get some sleep, but he refuses to do what she tells him as he desperately tries to maintain any sense of control over the situation. All of a sudden, Alina goes to the other room and begins to get undressed, and the two of them end up sleeping together in a very unromantic encounter. The next morning, Stone wakes up with the worst case of the Sunday scaries that anyone could possibly imagine. But with still no chance of getting out of there, he reluctantly decides that it's just better to settle in for the long haul.
Okay, well, that was something. With the way things are going, Stone needs to get out of there yesterday before the situation escalates any further. And the worst part is that he missed a clear opportunity to escape without even realizing it. Think for a minute about what just happened here. The boys came down into the crater for the first time, and clearly they didn't come for a friendly visit. But it's not like they got there by magic. Unless they have another path that we don't know about, then they had to climb down the same way that Stone did, which means that the ladder was back. Freedom was only a quick climb away, but Stone here was so busy trying to get into a drunken brawl with these crazy hillbillies that he didn't see his best chance at escaping this hellhole right there in front of him. If he'd been thinking clearly, then the smartest thing to do would have been to make a break for the ladder instead of blindly fighting with the kids, and hope that he was able to get there before they caught onto his plan. It's a painful opportunity to miss, and next time, Stone needs to remember what his real priorities are. But until then, it looks like we're back to square one, and somehow things are about to get even worse.
One brisk morning, several months later, Stone is busy out working in their garden when another one of the boys comes to see what he's up to. Noticing that this kid seems a bit more agreeable than the others, the man starts impressing him with his knowledge of plant life and ecosystems, hoping to eventually win him over as a potential ally. The kid quickly takes a liking to him and even tosses down a half-used pack of gum as a token of his friendship before turning to leave. For a moment, it looks like Stone's luck might actually be starting to turn around, but as he goes back to digging through the soil, he makes a disturbing discovery. Buried in the dirt are someone's car keys and a wedding ring, looking like they haven't seen the light of day in a very long time. A grim omen of what Stone's fate will be if he isn't able to find his way out. Later that day, Stone decides to ask Alina about the old black and white photo of an ancient-looking woman that's been hanging there on her kitchen wall. Alina simply explains that it's a picture of Mother. Not her mother, but the first mother, implying that whatever they've been up to down there has been going on for several generations. Stone's interested to hear more, but Alina doesn't remember much of anything about the woman's history. All that she knows is that Mother here loves her always, just like she's going to love the baby that's inside of her. The man sits in stunned silence for a moment as he processes what he's just heard, and then flies into a fit of rage as he realizes that he was tricked into being Crater Lady's baby daddy. But she makes it clear that she's having this child whether he approves or not, leaving him with no choice but to accept the situation for what it is. As the days continue to pass, Stone tries to keep himself busy by running laps around the crater like a caged animal, and one morning, he happens to notice a plane flying overhead for the first time since he was captured. Just then, the same friendly kid from before whistles down to him from up on the cliff, calling Stone over for another conversation. The kid explains that his name is Lepus. He's 12 years old, and he and the other kids live in a place that he calls the Palace. But when Stone asks him to elaborate, the kid says that he'd rather not get into the details. Stone begins to ask him if he wants to leave this place, and tells the boy that he and the pregnant woman need his help, but he wants him to get the rope that they use to lower down the supplies and use it to pull the two of them up instead, promising that they'll take him with them once they escape. After thinking it over, Lepus says that he's willing to try, but he'll have to do it without the others finding out. It looks like they're finally starting to get somewhere, but just as Stone and the boy finally come to an agreement, another one of the boys comes out and confronts them, revealing that he overheard their whole scheme, before dragging Lepus away back to wherever it is that they came from.
Okay, seeing that plane just reminded me that Stone here still hasn't tried to send a single message to the outside world besides just shouting at the sky every now and then. This would have been another chance for him to signal for help with a mirror or start a fire as a way to try to get the next plane's attention. Managing to signal for rescue is the most important thing that he can do for his own survival. But now that the boys are starting to turn violent, he also has to consider his options for fighting back in case things get out of hand. We know that there are 6 main boys that we've seen. 2 of them are too young to really cause a problem. And Lepus is cool, or at least it seems that way, which leaves us with only the 3 main boys to worry about. Not the best odds, but also not impossible. One of the easiest things to do would be to set up traps around the yard using junk from Alina's house, and then trying to lure them into coming down again so that Stone could go for the ladder. There's a lot of potential ways to go about this, like make an SOS sign on the ground and then waiting to attack them when they come down to ruin it, or refusing to come out of the house when they send down supplies to trick them into thinking that something might have gone wrong, and then ambushing them when they come to check it out. Whatever he does, the key is to lure them into using the ladder or showing him the other method that they're using to get down there, and then try to get out while avoiding a fight. Traps should help to thin them out, and while they're distracted by their injured friends, this would free Stone up to make a break for the exit. He needs to act fast though, because in a matter of hours, it's already gonna be too late.
Back in the cabin, Alina asks Stone about his conversation with the boy. Stone explains that he's not as bad as the rest of them, but keeps it deliberately vague when it comes to knowing exactly what they talked about, trying to conceal his plans to escape from Alina without knowing that she'd also secretly overheard everything that they'd said. Everything seems normal when they wake up the next morning, but the moment that Alina steps outside, she lets out a horrified scream. As Stone rushes out to see what's wrong, he's met with the disturbing sight of Lepus's lifeless body, strung up by his arms and legs over the center of the crater. The woman collapses with grief, shouting for the other boys to cut him down and crying out that this is not what brothers do. But Corvus and the others show no signs of remorse as they watch the scene unfold from up on the cliff. Stone tries to comfort her, but Alina shoves him away, furious with him for getting her son killed. While he's still struggling to process what's happened, Alina runs to the shack and grabs a heavy board of wood, swinging it at the back of Stone's head and knocking him out for the 3rd time in the last few months. The next time we see Stone, nearly 9 months have passed by. He's spent the entire time locked in a cage behind the woman's house, with his only human interaction coming on the rare occasions when she brings him a meal. Desperate to escape, he uses every bit of energy that he still has to try and break free, but he never seems to make any sort of progress, and he's all but completely lost his grip on reality. Right now, he's probably thinking that things couldn't get any worse, but the truth is that he's only a few nights away from finally getting out of there, just not in the way that he's been hoping for. Late that night, all of the boys descend down into the pit, and they send the youngest one over to the cage with a ball of bread for Stone to eat. Starving, he chomps down on it without thinking twice, but there's something in it that quickly makes him ill. While he watches from the cage, Alina comes out and joins the boys in some sort of strange moonlight ritual surrounding a bonfire, chanting and revealing with sadistic joy as they cover the woman in a white sheet and bathe in her blood. Finally, the day comes where Alina goes into labor, but for some reason, this time is more painful than any birth that she's experienced before. Overwhelmed with pain, she goes over to Stone's cage and finally lets him out, begging for his help. Just then, he notices that the rope ladder is finally back where it was and decides to make a break for it, never realizing that the boys are watching him from up above. Alina is in too much pain to make it, and just as he's about to leave the woman behind, she gives birth to his child there in the crater, a newborn baby girl. Hearing the kid's cries, Stone abruptly stops in his tracks, turning around to hold his child for himself. Overwhelmed with joy, Alina tells him that one day the girl will be the next mother, but this means that Stone here has officially served his purpose. All of a sudden, one of the boys sneaks up from behind him and violently slits his throat, killing Stone before he even knows what happened. Months later, Alina is still caring for her infant child, while Stone's body lies decomposing out in the front yard. He may have never made it out, but it seems like we can all learn a lesson from what happened here. If you ever bump into a lost kid while out in the middle of the desert, just leave the little creep for the coyotes instead.
But what would you guys do? Me personally, I wouldn't even be in the woods in the first place. I'd be sitting on the couch in front of my PlayStation 5 playing Grand Theft Auto 6. You already know. But if I did end up in the woods, then I wouldn't be following some random little kid out in the middle of nowhere, because that's how you get smoked. But let us know down in the comments what you guys would have done. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. I'll see you guys in the next video, and have a damn good day.